For the British, it's really simple. They don't have an economy outside of City of London because they've strangled it to death. Because in the end of the day, if anybody remonetizes gold, everybody has to remonetize gold. But clearly something ugly is going to happen between now and the election. The question then becomes, will somebody make a catastrophic move that we can't come back from?
All right, today we're having a discussion with Tom Luongo, a man who probably needs no introduction. Tom is of course a geopolitical and financial analyst, and he of course runs his own podcast. So Tom, with all the news going on with Israel, Iran, Ukraine, Russia, how close are we actually to World War III? As an easy question to start off with.
It's an easy question to start out with. I would say that we're closer today than we ever have been, because sadly, as I was writing about in the last blog post I put up and some of the other interviews I've done recently, which is to say that there are a lot of people out there who need a war to cover their default and to cover their failing position within the global marketplace. They have to secure collateral to be able to guarantee to the people that they've guaranteed a whole lot of a whole lot of business to, and they've written a lot of debt to support the war in Ukraine, and those investors of that debt, in this case, British sovereign bonds, various French and German sovereign bonds, American sovereign bonds, they have to be assured that they're going to be getting paid back. And the whole gambit in Ukraine was that they were going to go in and get all the resources, break Russia up, and then they would be able to pay for all of that out of cash flow for the next 100 years or more. It was the same goal that it was the same crazy gambit that the British and the French played in World War I. It's similar to the gambit that they played in World War II. And both times they got the United States to go along with it. Well, this time the United States doesn't seem to be all that interested in going along with it, but at the same time the U.S. can't lose face. And then we have a political and military split. We have a split between the political and the military hierarchy, I think, between basically the State Department and the National Security Council and the DoD. And I think it's pretty obvious that the Pentagon doesn't want to go to war with Russia. I think it's pretty obvious that the Pentagon would rather not go to war with Iran, but is willing to try and keep Israel from committing, ritualistic suicide, which is what I think they're in the process of doing. But the question then is, why is Israel doing that? And why has Ukraine committed ritualistic suicide as well and impaling themselves against the Russians? It's because they've been guaranteed by the British, by the French, by the Germans, that the Americans will come in and will do their dirty work for them and finally finish off Russia or Iran. And if they fail at that, then the whole thing collapses. And the European Union collapses. City of London, as we've known it for all of our lives, and everybody's life going back to practically the formation of the Bank of England in 1694. Everything we think we know about Wall Street, everything we think we know about the U.S. commercial banking cartel and everything else, all of that collapses. All of that has to then be I don't mean in some kind of dramatic, oh my God, tomorrow we wake up and there's no City of London. I mean that all of their influence and their ability to write checks that their mouths can't cash, their political agents can't cash anymore. I think that's what we're staring at when we talk about staring at them collapsing. And you can see it in the political trends within Europe and within the United States. You can see that they've always understood, as have I, that they have a very short window of time to get this done, because most of the people that they bought through Epstein and P. Diddy and all these other people and these influence scams, all those people are dying off. All of those people are old men and old women who are, they're past their use-by date, and they're just trying to get through this last thing. And so I think the American election is why they're pushing as much into the pile as possible. There's as many weapons onto the table as possible. They're pushing all their chips into the pot because they don't have any other option, and they're trying to bully the pot. And then even if they, and if they win the hand, well, they may not win the game, but it'll leave the United States in such a position it'll be terminally weakened by the process. If you think of it it's like a four-handed pot of poker, you get to it's like a final table, and you've got I was just thinking about this metaphor now as we were talking about this and as I was putting this together. So you've got like Europe and the Brits on one side, Europe, the Brits, China, Russia, Iran, and the U.S. And, you know, in order to bully Russia and China off the pot, the EU and the Brits have pushed all in, and they're forcing the Americans to call, because the Americans have put themselves in a position to call. If the Americans call, and Russia and China actually or Russia or China wins the pot, then everyone's weakened. What they're hoping for is that they actually are going to get their card on the river, win the pot, and everybody else had the call down the line. Everybody else would be weakened, and they would be strengthened. Right there, they would win the big pot. They would have the big pile of money, and everybody else will have spent a lot of resources on. And in my mind, this is the kind of hand that, when you're watching the World Series of Poker, you go, this guy's got 2 outs and there's 46 cards in the deck. It's your worst possible odds you could have. And I'm not even sure that that's an accurate description. I actually happen to think that they're kind of dominated, that if they get their out, what they don't realize is that their outs are outs that are going to ensure that everybody else gets stronger and make their hands better. So I may be overextending this metaphor, and for those of you who aren't poker players, I'm real sorry, but if you want to understand geopolitics, maybe you should sit down and play some Texas Hold'em. You can play online for free, and you can learn how to play the game, and you can watch high-level players play it and study the game, and you'll realize that there's a lot of lessons in there to understanding how people actually operate in the real world, because you can't hide at the poker table when your money's on the line, and you can't hide in geopolitics when your money's on the line. So you can walk out, but at the end of the day, it's also not a zero-sum game like a poker game, because poker game is a zero-sum game is only X amount of resources brought to the game. Everybody's got we've got, with central banks, a lot of these people have the ability to do infinite rebuys, right? They can go, well, I lost that $100,000. I'll take another $100,000. I'll just call the Fed and get another $100,000, or the Bank of England. But eventually, you run out of rebuys. Eventually, the central bank goes, dude, the balance sheet's $9 trillion. I can't. The deficit's 7% of GDP. I can't call the bank anymore. The bank is saying no. And in many respects, that would be the bondholders. So, as you continue to extend this metaphor, you realize that that's what's actually going on. And that's the way I see it. So, how close are we? Well, from somebody's perspective, very. And from other people's perspective, not very. And why in the hell are you doing this? But there you are. So, the question then becomes, will somebody make a catastrophic move that we can't come back from? And that's what we should be watching for. And we would have thought that was the bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline, or, killing Soleimani, or killing Nasrallah, or. And, the people on the other side of the equation, the Russians, basically the BRICS, are just sitting there going, hold. They're just like, they understand that they're dealing with, to extend another metaphor, make it really simple. Do you ever try and hold down a terrier and make him submit? Like a little rat terrier, or, a Jack Russell terrier or whatever. You ever try and make them submit by holding them? That's an out of control dog. That's going to fight until, flat on their back, growling. There's no way they can get out of this, and they won't give in. Well, that's the British. That's Klaus Schwab. He came out the other day. What did Schwab come out the other day and say? Oh, we have to do away with what? We have to do away with have to do away with private farms in order to stop global warming. I'm like, the aurora, we can see it in Puerto Rico. It has nothing to do with, cows farting. Dude, like, really? Like, the man's really dumb, actually, what it is. But, there's nothing we can do about it. We put dumb people in charge.
Great metaphors there with poker and dumb people and cow farts. Perhaps we can dive into why is the UK so desperate to make this all-in move, and also why is the US actually stringing along with this Ukraine conflict? Why are they allowing this to just continuously to escalate?
Well, for the British, it's really simple. They don't have an economy outside of the City of London because they've strangled it to death. The European Union strangled the British economy after Brexit with a strong euro and a stronger pound, and the fact that the Biden administration would not, nobody would give Britain a trade deal after Brexit was finished in 2019, and then they stole the election from Trump, and then, right? So all the benefits of Brexit were never allowed to accrue to the UK. So that means that basically the City of London, Bank of England, they are the economy. Well, what's that economy? It's financialization, it's currency exchange, and it's insurance on the base level of the economy, the global economy, which is oil tankers, shipping containers. That's what they make all their money in. That's what their best business is. That's what Lloyd's does. That's what all these people do. So, and they have these old banking and insurance relationships with, that's the way the world works, right? So that's all under threat if they lose control of the important maritime sea routes around the Asian Peninsula. And, a cynical way to look at Israel, sorry to the Jewish people in the audience, it's not to give the Jews a homeland. It's to turn Israel into a permanent aircraft carrier or an immovable aircraft carrier in the Middle East. And that's what it is. And everything else is just, is just propaganda. So when you think of it in those terms, the British have to push forward here. They don't have any other options. And as my friend Alex Craner has pointed out in the substacks and interviews he's done and given with both with me and with other people, is that his moment of a second, and in this case for Alex, it's his second moment of great independent journalism. The first was his book, The Grand Deception, about Bill Browder, which is how Alex and I became friends. And then the second is this moment in time where he's finally figured out and put the timeline together of why the British are so desperate, because they've guaranteed all this debt to the IMF on behalf of Ukraine. Well, that debt has to be paid. They've promised everybody here. And if you have promised everybody the moon and you can't pay back, well, we do live in a mobocracy. Does anybody? I don't know. The last time I watched The Godfather. You didn't pay the Don back. You got a barrel full of Tommy gun, right? You got
Tom, you
got a Tommy gun for dinner. Yeah.
For some perspective, what kind of figures are we talking about? What kind of bonds?
$40 billion in Ukraine debt to the IMF. We're talking about they still haven't paid back their $160 or $70 billion that they lost bailing out the pension funds when BlackRock pulled all their bids during the coup against Liz Truss back in the gilt crisis of 2022. They're desperately trying to hold the gilt market together so that, and this starts to get into bond spreads. You see it, the forensic evidence in the capital markets. You see the responses from the central banks and from policymakers to maintain credit spreads between everybody's sovereign debt and or the currency exchange rates. That's where you see that. So they're trying to hold everything in a very tight band, and while market forces are pulling those, are trying to pull against those bands, and of course we have the Federal Reserve sitting there going, look, we don't need to play this game anymore, because that's what happened when they raised interest rates to 5.5%. And that forced everybody in Europe and in the UK to spend money they didn't actually have, trying to then gin up a war in Ukraine in order, again, I am firmly of the opinion at this point that two of the reasons that they unleashed COVID-19 on the world on us was to get Powell back to the zero bound and to get rid of Donald Trump. Now, again, in no way, manner, shape, or form am I trying to say that the Americans are a victim here. Somewhat we are, but that's the American people. American sovereigntists are like, no, this is not cool. But American globalists went along with it, because how else did this get done? How else did the courts turn a blind eye to these things? How else did we have Congress, try to pass the laws that they tried to pass and everything else? So, everybody is crooked here, and everybody, at the power level, and everybody is a victim below that level. And the system has actually turned predatory on certain aspects of the system that will refuse to go along with it. So anybody who refuses to go along with their plans of MMT, digital currencies, all the stuff that we're all hip to now, and we didn't know anything about in 2020, 2020, 2019. Now we understand it, and we understand the threats of it. What we don't realize is that, well, we don't have to go that route. And the Federal Reserve is not interested in going that route because it makes no sense for the Federal Reserve to want to go that route, because why would the Federal Reserve want a central bank digital currency when they work for the commercial central banks or for the commercial banks? It doesn't make any sense. But the central banks that are all broke, that don't have the world's reserve currency, that don't have, that don't have the world's trade settlement currency, and don't have the strongest and most liquid bond markets, the most sophisticated bond markets and repo markets and financial markets in the world, well, they need that. And how else are they going to get that? Well, they got to get rid of that thing I just described, because that thing is far more powerful than all of their, all their pronouncements and all of their prime ministers of these weak governments that they put in charge in Belgium and Germany and the EU and the United States and the UK and everything else. These governments don't actually, at the end of the day, have any money. They don't actually have, and they don't have the mandate of the people. What they have is the gun, and that gun is rapidly being revealed to not have a whole lot of bullets. So all you got to do is wait these people out, and that's what Putin's done in fighting the war in Ukraine the way he has. He understood that the best way to beat the United States and or NATO in Ukraine and not give the U.S. the way you keep the United States formally out of Ukraine is you make it too expensive for them to fight the war in Ukraine. Okay, you fight the war in such a way that there's no way we can fight the war that Russia is offering us, and the only other war that we could win is one where we drop nuclear bombs on each other, and then nobody wins. So that's the gambit. You can either fight in a meat grinder in the eastern Donbass over swampland, or we can lob nukes at each other. Well, I got news for you. The Pentagon doesn't want to fight that war because they know they won't win it. Either of those wars, they know that there's no winning that. And the political hacks that Obama put in place at the Pentagon may want to win in Ukraine, but they have no path to do so when the lieutenant colonels and the colonels are saying, look, we don't have any capacity to fight this war, and we're not going to fight this war, no matter if you... And, oh, by the way, it's very clear at this point, they've told them we can't win the war. The Pentagon doesn't want to lose face. The MIC contractors in California don't want everybody to find out that their weapons don't frickin' work, because they want to be able to sell weapons for the next 2 generations, because they want that grift to keep going. So everybody's like looking at this going, holy shit, we could lose. No. We want the system to continue the way it is, where everybody thinks we're badder than we are. The weapons are going to, there's going to be able to use the tensions of that sound good on paper. Oh, China wants to take Taiwan. It's bullshit. China doesn't want to take Taiwan. And oh, by the way, take a trip to Phoenix one day and go look around what's happening outside of Phoenix, and go look at the TMSC plants that are being built outside of Phoenix, and then go to Boise, Idaho, and then go to Ohio and Illinois. And you'll see that, and Montana and other places, we're building chip factories all over the United States. TMSC is literally colonizing the United States. Taiwan won't matter anymore. Taiwan was created as a single point of failure in order. We put all the chip factories in Taiwan on purpose to create a potential casus belli, so that we could spend money in trying to rein in China. Like, the policy follows, the reality of where the capital flows to follows the desired policy. It's not the other way around. Okay? And so once you kind of see it that way and you understand, like, okay, fine, in 5 years, Taiwan won't matter. The Taiwanese will welcome the Chinese in, and we won't care. But as long as in between that now and then, Lockheed Martin, Grumman, Raytheon, or whatever they're calling themselves this week, General Dynamics, General Electric, and Westinghouse, and all the rest of them, have their contracts in place for the next 30 years, they don't give a shit anymore. And then you won't see Stratfor and the CIA and Peter Zeihan and Kyle Bass and all these other freaking assholes running around ginning up a war with China. Because that's who they work for, whether they realize it or not. I mean, by the way, if you like Peter Zeihan, you think his analysis is trenchant, maybe it is. But doesn't matter whether he does work for the CIA or not. In reality, de facto, he does, because he's carrying the water for the policy that they want, or in the DOD and the MIC. He's doing what they want. So it doesn't really matter. And it's the same criticism I have of certain members of the libertarian movement and everything else. A lot of people are unwitting at best water carriers for the very people that they think they're exposing. So you have to be just really sophisticated to go, that's why capital markets and the movement of capital is so very important, and then understand who's got what incentives to figure out what's actually going on. And that's what Britain wants. Europe wants access to Middle Eastern oil because they don't have any. And they hate the Brits, and they don't want the Brits on the north, drilling off of Scotland unless they control the United Kingdom. So that's why Europe is on the side of the the Palestinians, nominally, and why the Brits traditionally have always backed Israel. And I've said for a long time that you can watch the. Isn't it a shock that the EU keeps trying to destroy British politics and force new British elections over and over and over again? Every year, it's like, since Brexit. Well, it's the same thing's been happening in Israel. Every 18 months, we're having another freaking election. And if you go and you look at the people that were going up against Netanyahu, you realize that they all work for friggin' Ursula von der Leyen. Effectively, they all work for Ursula von der Leyen, right? I mean, so the opposition, so Netanyahu's opposition in Israel maps to what I call Davos, the European Union. And, Netanyahu is clearly just a classic British neoconservative. And there's, the stench of Zionism on both sides in order to, just like we have the stench of neoconservatism on both sides here in the United States. Because it's, at the end of the day, it's about, it's about moving either side's electorate, both sides of the electorate, in the same direction by creating a false divide and creating a false opposition. So, at the end of the day, most Democrat and Republican leadership here in the U.S., they get done at the end of the day yelling at each other in Congress, and they all go to the same bars and drink the same cocktails. Like, please, they all go to the same parties.
And Tom, if we're actually talking about Israel-Iran conflict, recently Iran attacked Israel on the 1st of October with roughly 200 ballistic missiles. Israel has stated they want to retaliate. What should we expect? There were rumors about this island in front of Iran where 90% of its oil capacity flows through. Should we expect a hit there, their nuclear capacity? What should we be looking out for?
It all depends on what the Americans are willing to guarantee for Israel, because all the Arab states, if you'll notice, have closed all their airspaces to Israel. And that has not been the case in the past. So, I don't know. I'm at the point now where I really believe these people screwed up. They stole Joe Biden's money. They're now making him the scapegoat for everything that's gone wrong as they try to promote Kamala Harris. And they stole the money he raised. Now, Joe Biden is a mob boss. So is Donald Trump. So is Barack Obama, for lack of a better term. So is George Soros and all the rest of these people. You steal $300 million from a mob boss, do you expect him to roll over and take it lightly? If you don't understand that, then I recommend you stop listening to me and go watch a couple of seasons of The Sopranos, and then you'll understand at least the basics of it, or just watch The Godfather or whatever. So Joe Biden is really, really, really obviously butthurt about having been put in a situation to be the scapegoat, and they stole his money. And they want him to do their bidding all the way down the line, when he's really just wants to exit the scene, pardon his son, take his money, and secure some kind of legacy. I'm setting up here for all of Joe's recent weird behavior, where he seems to be trying to sabotage Kamala Harris. Now the question is, and I think this is thin, but I have to state it anyway because it's kind of fun. But who's the only person in Washington who he can get a straight answer out of that if you shake his hand, he'll agree to it? It's Donald Trump. Because who's the only person that can secure the fact that Joe Biden is not going to go to jail after this is all over? And that Hunter Biden, bygones be bygones. You do this for me, I'll make sure your family's taken care of. Now, those two hate each other. So, do I believe that those two got into a room and shook hands over this? No. Do I believe they're consiglières, exchanged letters through their lawyers' offices? Yes, I do. Because the turn in behavior has been stark. And while Biden is dementia patient, he is also, if you understand what he likely has, and we don't know what he has, but he likely has vascular dementia, which means that he's lucid 3 to 4 hours a day, depending on the drug cocktail that they give him. Notice how he goes out for about 15 to 20 minutes, is relatively lucid, does what he wants to do. His handlers can't control him. And then you also know that people in the throes of dementia get really angry and really belligerent as they get older, when they go through it. It's really hard to be the caregiver of somebody in that position, okay? Because they're really mean. And Joe's pissed. And Joe's really mean. So, let's put all that together and then ask the question, do you think that Joe Biden, as commander-in-chief of the military, is just going to roll over and let Israel do exactly what they want to do, knowing full well that the people who screwed him over are the ones that rolled him over in order to take all of his money from him to advance their agenda? No. Joe would be like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. But sir, no, we're not doing that. And Joe Biden would be the only time the two of them agreed about anything this entire presidency is going to go along with him, because she's just as angry because she's just as much of a power-hungry bitch as the rest of them up on Capitol Hill. So, she's clearly a crazy woman. So, in my mind, when systems are falling apart, when everybody realizes that the whole thing is coming crashing down, everybody goes and tries to get what they can before the lights get shut off. And that's when everybody steals everything that's not bolted down. And they fuck each other over, and they stab each other in the back, and they do everything imaginable. What happens if you're Joe Biden? You got nothing left to lose other than the pardon of Hunter Biden, because that's really all Joe has left. And you hold that over his head, and you force that until after the election's over. Keep putting off the sentencing. You can't pardon Hunter until he's been sentenced. So that's leverage. And what if Hunter Biden, because Ukraine is over, is no longer of any use to Joe? Because it's not like Joe's a good dad. Not like Joe loves his children. Hunter was a means to an end. He was a means to a legacy in Ukraine through his business dealings in Ukrainian energy. But if the Russians are now going to be in charge of all that Ukrainian energy, which is likely what's going to happen, then Hunter has no use to Joe anymore, and the leverage of pardoning Hunter before he leaves office is no longer leverage. So this is why it's an easy deal to say to Trump, look, man, just make sure that my family isn't gutted after this is all over, and I'll get out of the way, and I'll let you beat Kamala. And when the shit hits the fan during the election and they try to play to pull their bullshit, be like, no, I'm still commander-in-chief. No, it's not happening. But Joe, no. What are you going to do, kill me?
A very interesting take, completely different direction than I expected. But let's continue on that Russia tangent you were on to Kazan, Russia. There's a summit, 22nd of October till 24th, if I'm correct. They're rumored to announce a BRICS-Unit, supposedly, potentially partially backed by gold. Recently, I heard this interesting take from Simon Hunt, who was speculating that the US might try to prevent actually the summit from happening by starting a larger scale war in Israel-Iran. To prevent the effects this BRICS unit would have on the US dollar. What is your take roughly on that quickly summarized take?
I don't think they're going to be able to stop the BRICS Summit in Kazan, Russia. I think they are trying to, distract everybody. And I think it's I think it's not a bad thesis. I think that's another subplot in what we're seeing. I think the British bond markets are far more important. Because in the end of the day, if anybody remonetizes gold, everybody has to remonetize gold. This is the problem. But what we're seeing, what I'm seeing in the capital markets and what I'm seeing in the policy surrounding the capital markets that Vince Lonsky and I have talked about at great length. And if you haven't talked to Vince, you should, because Vince is a badass. Is that the world is moving to a series of currency blocks and economic blocks and trading blocks, all based around how much gold they actually have. And that means that gold is going to stop flowing. And if gold stops flowing, then credit can't flow beyond the amount of trade if everybody demands some form of trade settlement in gold, and then all of a sudden armies stop flowing. Because trade needs to keep happening. Everybody needs the trade to keep happening. But that means that the credit holders eventually will kick and scream and whine and wail like a terrier that refuses to submit, but eventually you just shoot the dog. Or the dog finally knuckles under after it finally gets so damn tired it can't fight anymore. But they will fight until they have no energy left. That's what those dogs were bred for. And these people have massive entitlement, and that manifests in humans as a massive sense of entitlement, an unbelievable sense of narcissism, and narcissists never ever accept blame. It's always your fault. You're the bad guy. You made me do this, and so we're going to see that before we walk out the door. You made me do this. Well, no, you could have just stopped being evil. You could have stopped this, you could have stopped trying to dominate me or stopped trying to take my life from me. And what we need to do ultimately is to look at them and go, you're not important anymore. Now, there's a number of ways. That's metaphor. We can't actually say, they don't have power and they're not acting. We can't just walk away from them, because if we, that's just, they'll just keep running the table on us. But you have to stop giving them the supply that narcissists crave. And so the BRICS are going to continue to do their thing, even though we scream at them, no, don't do that, no, don't do that. And then that's when the Russians send out Dmitry Medvedev after he's had a few, to post up pictures of Poland, as one big crater after former Polish defense minister says something along the lines of we should nuke St. Petersburg, and Medvedev's like, that's nice. Is this what you want for Poland in the future? And it's a big, and he just took a crater from the moon and had it overlaid over Poland, because that's what Poland would look like. And the Russians are not fucking around. And I don't know. I don't care if that means they're weak or they're not weak. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they're willing to go there because they have to, because they're going to fight. They're not, because the Russians firmly do believe that a world without a Russia is a world not worth living in. They're not going to just hand everything over to the British. They've been fighting the British for 300 years. They're not going to give up tomorrow because the British, blew up an ammo dump, or killed 150, or paid some Ukrainians to kill 150 people at the Moscow Opera House. Okay? I'm not gonna, or they blew up Nord Stream 2. Shit, it's a pipeline. We can rebuild it. It's a bridge. We can rebuild it. Yeah, it'll suck. Yeah, it'll cost a couple of years. All right, well, we suffered for 80 freaking years under the system you fucking people gave us after the Soviet Revolution and the Red Revolution in 1970, and we'll do it again, and we'll teach you this lesson again. Okay? That's where I think we are. I don't know what it's going to look like, but clearly something ugly is going to happen between now and the election. But the closer we get to the election, we're also starting to see pieces moving into place that tell you that that they're going to try X, and we're going to say no, and then they're going to try Y, and we're going to say no, and then at some point they're going to call on the military to enforce their will, and the military is going to go, not our problem. It's a political problem. You guys work it out. And that'll be that. And that's what's going to happen. I know it's going to end with the military. And 4 years ago, I said this would end with the military. And it would end with the colonels and the lieutenant and full bird colonels standing down and saying, no, I'm not deploying my troops against American people. More against, in service of the civilian government, which has clearly lost the plot. And that's the gambit they're playing for.
Are we talking a civil war scenario?
No, we're talking a procedural transfer power scenario. When we start talking about civil war, is once that fails, the next move on the table is to activate Gavin Newsom in California to secede have California secede. And at that point, newly elected President Donald Trump claps that motherfucker in irons, and this shit ends. I'm dead serious. I think you're going to, the idea that we're going to go in there and we're going to act like a bunch of reasonable, effeminate males that are not going to just, take our friggin', it's going to unbutton the shirt and go, look, I have hair on my chest, fuck you. I have testosterone flowing through my veins, and I've got a family to protect, and I've got a country to save, and I don't care. And Trump has authoritarian tendencies. And as a libertarian, I'm okay with it. People are mass murderers. They're mass murderers. They deserve to die. I don't have a problem with this. Pick a procedure, kill them. They're done. They're mass murderers. Once you've murdered somebody, you forfeit your right to your own life and property. I can make we libertarians are really simple about this. An eye for two eyes and a little bit of scaring. That's the libertarian justice theory. It's not tough. You took my eye, I get my eye back, and I get to take yours, and I get to hurt you, and I get to make you frightened in the process so that you never do it again. And these people are an eye for zero eyes and a little bit of community service. No. I'm sorry. It's not that's not reasonable. That's not stooping to their level. That's just taking care of business and protecting the gene pool. I don't understand this. I mean, maybe it's because I'm Sicilian or Italian. It's just, maybe it's just very obvious to me. But this is mob rule. You want mob rule? Okay, but you're murderers. This isn't tough. They've stolen ungodly trillions of dollars from the humanity. At some point, just because you refuse to admit it and you go, we'll prove it in the court of law. No, you own the law. You own the courts. I'm not doing it. We're not playing that game. And everybody knows it. And, it's not, I don't care what that sounds like in terms of being, you're a vigilante I don't care. I don't care anymore. I really honestly never have. Because there's no point in playing nice with these people, because these people all see ceasefires as an opportunity to bomb you later. Hello? I've been in sparring matches where the guy said, oh, hold on. I'm beating the crap out of the guy, metaphorically speaking. I'm winning. And the guy goes, oh, hold on, let's reset. And then while we're resetting, he punches me in the nose. I'm oh, that's it, we're done. And I throw down and I just put him on the ground. That's happened in the dojo. That's the proper response to that kind of person. But that's what we've done to the Russians in Syria 100 times. It's what they're trying to do, what Zelensky is trying to do in Ukraine right now. Hey, let's have a ceasefire, but let's not invite the Russians, and let's never admit that they're going to get any of the territory back. What war do you think you're fighting here? Like the Russians are going to give back, are going to stop fighting because you believe your own propaganda to the point where you think that what 50. I mean, I have people literally think that the Russians have lost 600,000 people in Ukraine.
What do you think
That's
the
how
figure
many.
is then?
Right? I think it's 60 at best. They've been fighting a war for 2 years with standoff artillery and drones, and then once everything. I mean, I've watched the day-to-day of this war. And I'm like, the way the Russians are fighting this war, they're sending 12 guys in to take a town after they soften it for 3 weeks with artillery and drones, and the Ukrainians are all leaving. It's like mostly just squad to squad. It's mostly squad to squad stuff, but they sell it like the Russians are still moving 40 and 50,000 people into these offensives. Maybe that was the way it was at Bakhmut. Sure. Maybe Avdiivka. They didn't lose 600,000 people between friggin' Bakhmut and Avdiivka, folks. I got news for you. The Russians have, trained through 2 years of warfare now. They've rotated through 2 million men. Now they've got or however many men they have in their army. And they now all have combat experience to a greater or lesser extent. All the men who have combat experience in Ukraine are dead. That's why they're press ganging them out of nightclubs. Okay? That's why Poland's press ganging them and sending them back to Ukraine. And the first thing Putin did was he emptied all the jails and said, if you fight for Mother Russia, and you survive, we'll commute your sentence. So he took the hardest, nastiest men in Russia and sent them to fight in the war. Think about that for a minute. And being a good Russian, most of them weren't Russians. Most of them were Tajiks and Chechens, and you know what I mean? Like Putin's no saint. He's a mob boss. But like a good mob boss, he keeps his word. And everybody in the BRICS knows that Putin will keep his word. And that's why he won't give his word to the Americans. And that's why the turning point in all of this, geopolitically, was the day that Putin called the Americans not agreement capable. And that happened in 2014. And it happened, I think it was when he addressed the UN. And by doing that, that's all you needed to know. He would never accept any deal. He would always know that any deal he made with the Americans, he would make for his own advantage, not for theirs. And he tried a couple of times to cut a deal, March of 2022, for example, had a peace deal signed with Zelensky, and then Boris Johnson famously blew it up. Well, that was the last time. He tried it with the Minsk agreements. He got Angela Merkel, who, he thought he had a good relationship with. And because he has a soft spot for Germans, because he was stationed in East Germany as a young KGB agent, thought that, she would be as good as her word. I mean, Putin's made mistakes. There's no doubt about it. And invariably, whenever he's made mistakes, it's because he tried to trust these people, and these people are demons. Or terrorists.
Is that also... yeah, that is the same thing. Is that also why Russia and the BRICS is now pushing for that BRICS-Unit to really step away from the US financial system? Because like you said, they're not deal worthy. Well,
yeah, they're not. And they know that Putin said recently, I think he said it at SPIEF, if not at SPIEF, then at one of the other major conferences. Recently he said, look, it's not like we wanted to leave the dollar system. We were thrown out of it. So that's what they're doing. And if they go to a gold-backed system, then, or at least a gold-covered system, to keep each other honest, which is what they should do, then it's going to put pressure on the West. Because at the end of the day, they control 40% of global GDP. And a lot of the strategic commodities that make the global economy run. And no, sorry, Klaus Schwab, but it's not going to be a whole, you still have to, have energy to run the server farms, even if you are going to upload all our consciousnesses into the net. I'm being facetious, of course. I know it's hard for me to roll my eyes in public, right? Just try to look at the camera. Like, I'm not really ever quite sure what to do with that. I guess I just roll my eyes. So like, dude, it's not happening. What we need is stuff. And we need that copper and that aluminum and the titanium and the tungsten and the tungsten and the tungsten and the tungsten and the uranium ore. And I'm dead serious about the tungsten, folks. Like, it's a big, important freaking metal. As a metallurgist, I can tell you, tungsten's kind of important. You can get it from 2 places on Earth in reasonably sized deposits. Vietnam, up near Da Nang in the north, and Russia. That's it. Anywhere reasonably politically stable that you can actually go get the shit out of the ground. I mean, yeah, you can go to Afghanistan. I'm sure that there's plenty in, Mongolia and I'm sure there's some in Mongolia. I'm sure there's some in other mountain ranges in the world, but we haven't found significant tungsten deposits in the Rockies. So the Russians have got that. And it's a big, big metal. You can't do most of the really important high melting point nickel superalloys without tungsten, without rhenium, and a few other metals like this. You can't do them. It's why jet engines are so expensive. Does anybody know? Do you want to know why jet engines are so expensive? It's really simple. They're made out of Hastelloy X. That's the brand name of the Hastelloy series of nickel superalloys. And guess what the primary dopant in that metal in that alloy is? It's the most expensive metal on the planet. It's rhenium. Uranium is $8,600 an ounce. You need pounds of uranium to make a jet engine on an F-16. Ask me how I know this. I used to work in the industry. That's why I know. I was hoping that I could dope my nickel boron that I was working on with rhenium to raise the melting point so that I could coat 6061 aluminum with my coating, and then we could drop the price of an F-16 engine from $50 million to $5 million. Didn't work. The rhenium destroyed the coating. There you go. Because that's the whole point of surface modifications, is take a cheap metal and put an expensive metal on the outside, but I only put this much of it, and then you make the whole thing out of a lot of cheap metal, and then that's how they make aluminum block engines. You think you think the inside of your cylinder heads on an aluminum block engine are made out of aluminum? Okay, I have beachfront property in Brooklyn I want to sell you. No, it's all coated with high temperature superalloys and ceramics that don't break down in the heat and the corrosivity of gasoline and ethanol as it explodes.
Very interesting tangent there, Tom. Really appreciate that chemistry and metallurgy.
I know it's supposed to be geopolitics and markets, but this is really important. You can't do this stuff without understanding why people are actually fighting over this stuff. They're fighting over the things that run the world. In that respect, Ayn Rand wasn't wrong. The engine that runs the world. You got to build that engine, right? I got news for you. That engine usually requires very specialized materials.
No. Is this truly what the conflict is about? You have the West that is very financialized, and you have the BRICS that is really focused on those commodities, and they're all large commodity producers, and they have large gold holdings. Is that really what it all comes down to?
It's part of it, right? It is ultimately because the commodities are the collateral, and the classic kind of leftist or libertarian criticism of the West is that they're all colonial powers, stealing the wealth of the indigenous populations. Which you could argue is that, okay, yeah, well, the indigenous populations could never get the cobalt out of the ground, or the tungsten, or the gold, or the lead, or the silver, or whatever it is. That's fine. And so we would come in and we would work with them. But of course, we were paying them 0.1 cent on the dollar and pulling the stuff out and paying them nothing in return. Not giving. And then when they asked for 1%, we were like, no, go in and kill these people, or saddle them with a government that was needed to. And then we, after shooting them didn't work, then we had to do loan sharking, for lack of a better term. So the IMF is just the world's biggest freaking loan shark. That's all they are. So, of the mob bosses that run the G7. How about we demystify the world? The IMF's the loan shark. The World Banks are the loan sharks. and we're the mob bosses. We just happen to call them the President of the United States, the French Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister. The Canadian guy doesn't count. Yada, yada, yada. So, the German Chancellor. So, that's what they've always done. If they would actually give these... So, these people today are saying, no. We want better than that. We want more than that. We want to be partners in this, not slaves, not serfs. And the British are like, but you're inferior. Why should we give you anything? Hell, we hate our own people. We hate you more. You're the wrong color. Come on. I use the British as an example because they're the most extreme. And every British person I've ever talked to from the British middle class has always said the same thing. You are so freaking right. Thank you. And it's all over British. It's like it's everywhere. It's Downton Abbey, for Christ's sake, folks. Did you ever watch Downton Abbey? Like the British have like unbelievable levels of anxiety over this. They talk about it all the time. It's like it's all part of their art, and they're all the Merchant Ivory movies and all the Jane Austen. It's all part of the same shtick. The British aristocracy having to deal with the fact that technology and wealth was democratized because we discovered oil. Basically, 150 years later, we're still fighting about it. It's just dumb. Why don't you just cut these people in for 10% and shut the fuck up? We can go back to work. And we can raise our kids. And we don't have to eat the bugs and live in pods and all the rest of this crap. I mean, when these people talk about what it is that the future that they think we need to have is because they want it all for themselves. They don't want 75% of it or 85% of it or even 50%. They want 99.9% of it. It's not good enough.
You're referring to your Davos crowd, right?
Yeah, well, that's what we're talking about. Davos, the British remnant, the American neocons, the American exceptionalists, all these people, they're all variations on the same thing. They're all just globalists. And the last thing they want is to see wealth democratized around the world. Now they're fighting that same fight that they've always fought before against people who they capitalized thinking that they were backwards, the Chinese, the Russians, who they thought were backwards. And they were going to be able to go in and do what they did everywhere else, which is take over the finance, which is go in, invest, get the control at the financial level, and then use that as financial oligarchs to then exert political power. And the Chinese were like, that's nice. You people are cute. We're not opening our capital account. No, not doing it. Offshore yuan, onshore yuan. Stay in that way. The CCP is still in charge, and you people are at the back of the line when all the investments went bad, i.e. Evergrande, Archegos Capital, and others. Like this was the story, and it was very obvious. And that's why, I've said this before. Like you go back to Evergrande, when Evergrande blew up, and Xi came out and said, effectively, they came out and said, well, the foreign bondholders are going to be the last ones paid out in all of this stuff. And 2 weeks later, George Soros literally writes an article calling Xi Jinping the devil. I wonder how much money Soros and company and MI6, who he works for, how much they lost in Evergrande. Then you got to ask yourself the question, why did Evergrande fail? Oh, well, free market, the Chinese property. How about they killed it? Did you ever think about that? Did you ever think that they just pulled the plug on the fucking thing, paid off the guys who were willing to submit to Xi and the CCP, bankrupted the other guys, and then cut off the foreign investors? Do you ever think that that's what happened? Because that happens all the time. Because that's the story of Lehman Brothers. Wall Street was like, you people are fucking assholes, and you killed the golden goose, and now we're buying up your book of business at pennies on the dollar, and y'all get the and no, Dick Fold, you don't even get to keep the condo. You don't even get to keep the cabana where you were banging the cabana girl. We take it all from you. It's all done. It's all over. No, you don't even get to write a book. explaining your side of it so that you can get a $5 million payoff from Simon and Schuster. You get nothing. So old Willy Wonka thing. You lose, sir. You get nothing because you killed the golden goose. And they did. Like Fold and Lehman Brothers killed the golden goose. And Wall Street's pissed about it. And they handed like a tremendous amount of power away out of the hands of the New York commercial banks to the Federal Reserve and to the Eurodollar markets for 15 years. And that's why we wound up at the zero bound in QE. No, Diamond and those guys were never happy about that, but there was nothing they could do about it. But, we were sold like really, really simplistic narratives about this. Hell, I was sold completely, and I believed all this shit for years. And now I go back and I think about it. I'm like, that's not what happened. So, because, the story we're ever told is never the real story. So it was the fake story.
Tom, thank you so much for your generosity with your time and with taking us along in your way of thinking. I would love for you to end off with sharing how people could do business with you if they enjoy what you're talking about. How can they reach out? Where can they find you?
Sure. You can find me over at my blog at goldghostsandguns.com or tomluongo.me. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728, which are my initials, and the number 1728. And if you want to know why that is, all you got to do is ask. I'll tell you eventually, but you got to ask me on Twitter. And of course, you can sign up at the Patreon at patreon.com/goldghostsandguns, where we do twice weekly market reports and on Wednesdays and Sundays, private blogs, and of course the monthly newsletter, which is where we make our money, telling people what stocks I think work and what portfolio strategy works best to deal with where we are today. And, look ahead at the future. That's what we do.
Great. So many more threads to talk about, so many other topics I would love to talk about, but in respect of time, really appreciate it, Tom.
I appreciate it. Thank you. We'll do it again.